Hello and welcome to another edition of Inside Guns with your host, me, the Yankee Marshal. Now today I want to do a little bit of a deep dive. And the reason I want to do this deep dive is because of a video I did yesterday. I posted a video yesterday where I stated I don't believe in background checks. I think felons should be allowed to buy firearms if they're back out on the street, if they have paid their debt to society, they should have their rights restored. Well, when I made that video after I posted it yesterday, it'll be today because I filmed these ahead of time, one day. But when I posted it today, I immediately got a lot of feedback and a lot of it not pleasant. And that unpleasant feedback came from both sides of the aisle. Some people said, hey, I don't like the idea that you think felons should be allowed to buy guns. Felons should never be allowed to buy guns. It's always been that way. It should always be that way. Blah, blah, blah. No court ever disagreed with that. Blah, blah, blah. Which is garbage because, it hasn't always been that way, but we'll get more into that in a minute. And also on the other side of the aisle, I got arguments from people who said that they were upset because of the thumbnail I chose for the video. See, I titled the video, There Needs to Be Some Reasonable Restrictions on Firearms. And in the picture I had two black kids holding guns. And people are like, you're implying that black people are the problem with gun violence and you're a racist and blah, blah, blah. And actually, there's nothing racist about it at all. What I'm doing is I'm being historic. And I'm pointing out the hypocrisy and the racism of a lot of people who support gun laws and the gun laws themselves. You see, a lot of people, when they say, I don't want felons owning guns, what they really mean is, I'm afraid of black people owning guns. And that's the way it's been in this country for many, many years, hundreds of years, actually. That's where gun laws come from. They were all designed as a way to keep guns out of the hands of freed slaves. Slaves and then freed slaves. And this goes all the way back to the colonies. If you look back at the colonies, when they first started bringing slaves over, when slaves numbered in the hundreds in the colonies, the first thing they did was pass laws saying that slaves were exempt from militia duties, meaning they didn't have to be able to keep and bear arms because they weren't part of the militia, therefore they weren't covered under those rules. So that was like the first step they took to make sure blacks never owned guns. Let's not pretend racism wasn't alive and well in our country for hundreds of years, because blacks weren't just seen as slaves and they wanted to keep them subservient. They were seen as subhuman and they didn't think they needed guns because if they had guns, they were violent and wild and they would turn on the white man. So gun laws stem from that. If you look back even after there started being freed slaves, well, they had lots of laws on the books that dealt with, okay, you're freed now, but you're still not a full person and you don't get to own guns. They had laws banning black people from owning guns, from possessing guns, being in possession of a gun, especially carrying a gun. If you were found guilty of being black while being pretty much anywhere in the vicinity of a handgun or a firearm or rifle, whatever, you would be severely punished. From fines that were exorbitant at the time, all the way up to being publicly flogged, whipped in the town square, imprisoned, etc. And those whippings often resulted in death. They were very intense. People would get infections. They would die from those. So basically, these black laws that they passed when they were still saying, well, you might be free, but you're not a real person because you're not white. These laws stated that, you can't own them. If you own them, you could face punishment anywhere from prison to the death penalty, basically. So they were very intent on keeping guns out of the hands of black people. Now, things started to get even worse when it became time that the 14th Amendment was being put forward as a thing. And for those of you not familiar, the 14th Amendment is the amendment that says, all people are equal and they should receive equal treatment under the law, regardless of their race or whatever. And you can understand a lot of racists at the time didn't want this to pass. So there were all kinds of laws on the books already preventing black people from owning guns. So the Ku Klux Klan, other organizations decided, well, we can't have people voting and getting this thing passed, so we discourage people from voting by running around with guns and everything else, threatening people, trying to frighten people, keeping them away from the polls, just all kinds of tactics they were using. And of course, they didn't want those people to be armed, so they had tons of laws on the books that prevented them from being armed. They only wanted the white man to have guns. That was very clear. And after the 14th Amendment got passed, a lot of these black laws, etc., that they had became immediately unconstitutional. So they had to start thinking, oh my God, what do we do? What do we do? So they started doing things to even though black people had now been said they're equal, they started saying, well, crap, if they're equal, that means not only can they vote, they can own guns. All these laws we passed are no good anymore. So what they did is start passing new laws and finding new ways to prohibit people from owning guns, black people from owning guns. In fact, in a lot of states, especially southern states, they just took old laws that prevented slaves and freed men from owning guns and replaced that with, people or citizens, and then only enforced the laws on black people. Because they could no longer say that blacks can't do this and blacks can't do that. So what they did is say, well, people can't do this, but then they would only enforce it if you were black. Because they did not want blacks having guns. Once again, people were afraid of black people with guns. So, and that was the way it has been through history. Even after the 14th Amendment, when everybody was, declared equal, you had Jim Crow laws. That made it really difficult for blacks to ever do anything equally. They imposed literacy tests at polling places because they didn't want blacks to be able to vote, because they knew up until then most blacks hadn't been taught to read. So if they had to pass literacy tests, they wouldn't be able to vote. But they put in an exemption for whites that couldn't vote by saying if your grandfather was able to vote in this country and your father was able to vote in this country, well, then you could vote. So they put this little thing in there, this exemption, so that the illiterate white people, which there were a lot of at the time, they could still vote because their pappy and their grandpappy voted. But the newly made equal black people couldn't unless they passed the literacy test, because their parents and grandparents were slaves and didn't get to vote. So all of these laws were meant to keep guns out of the hands of black people. And it was very blatant, like I said, up to about the 14th Amendment, where they said, anybody born in this country, is another thing the 14th Amendment says, is a citizen, regardless of what color skin they have. When that passed and they could no longer say, well, black man can't do that, black man can't do that, well, then they started to have to think of different ways, like I said, the Jim Crow laws, etc. And then when people started getting wise to that, when they started saying, hey, you're only enforcing these laws against blacks, either you have to start enforcing them equally or they have to go away, they thought of different ways. They started thinking, well, if we can't say blacks can't own guns, well, one thing we could do is we could say, well, people who get convicted of a violent crime can't own firearms. We'll do that. And then law enforcement in these counties and towns and states even, all they have to do is go out and basically round up black people, slap a bogus charge on them, get them convicted in a kangaroo court, and then send them back out onto the streets and say, well, now, sorry, you're a convicted felon or you're convicted of a violent crime, you can't own a gun. And that's true of white people too, but we're just not rounding up white people and giving them bogus charges. And that continued for a very long time. Jim Crow was a horrible period of time for people, and it was just not fair. And gun laws have never been about being fair. They've never been about stopping crime, and they've never been about being fair. They've been about stopping certain classes of people, certain races of people from owning firearms. And until 1968, like I said earlier, felons could buy guns unless they were convicted of a violent crime. Before it wasn't had to do anything to do with felonies, it's just violent crime. So if they could convict a black guy of saying, oh, he made a physical pass at a white woman, grabbed her wrist, or bam, no more guns for him. But in 1968, people were getting wise to him, so they had to start, being creative, being a little more sneaky. And one thing Nixon was good at is he was good at saying, well, I don't like hippies, but I can't make being a hippie illegal. But what is something hippies like? Oh, they like marijuana. So I'll make marijuana illegal, and that way I can arrest all the hippies, put them all in jail. And then if they do get out, they'll have criminal records and they won't be able to function in society again. And that's the same thing they did with blacks and guns. They knew blacks are more likely to be convicted of a felony. Far more likely. In the court systems of the time, they were far more likely. In fact, today it's still a little lopsided. So they knew if we make it to where felons can't own guns, well, then black people won't be able to own guns. At least most of them won't. And then we'll put other infringements on them and try to make it hard for them. In fact, the first concealed carry licenses were created so that people would have to jump through hoops to be able to carry a gun, and black people wouldn't be able to do it. They were making it harder for them to get your carry license back in the day when blacks were first freed. In the state of Florida, you had to be able to go in and fill out forms. You had to be able to do these other things that a lot of newly freed black people, new citizens, couldn't do. So even concealed carry laws were designed to prevent black people from having guns. So it's all about racism. So when I post that picture on that video yesterday, I posted it to point out that so many people, when they say felon, they mean blacks. Just like when they started saying freedmen, and when they started saying, certain citizens and other things, they were not targeting everyone. They were targeting blacks. And the laws today do the same thing. Now, today, I don't think it's as much about being black as it is being poor. Most of the laws these days, they don't distinguish between the color of someone's skin as much as they used to. They're about keeping certain classes of people from owning firearms. Poor people, a lot of whom are white. That's why they put hoops that people have to jump through. That's why they charge fees for things like carry licenses. That's why they want to put training requirements on things, because they know it's harder for certain groups of people to do that. It's just test after test, basically. They're all basically literacy tests. Just all of these things. They're tests of means now, except instead of just literacy. And if you don't pass them, you don't get to carry a gun. You don't get to buy a gun. If they've been able to railroad you through the system, which poor people are far more likely to go through the court systems than people of means, because people of means get away with it, they'll lose their rights. So right now it's gotten to where gun laws started off 100%, don't even try to fool yourself, as a racist endeavor. In fact, police departments, as we know them now, were a racist endeavor. They started as groups of armed people deputized to basically chase down runaway slaves. And then usually they were used to control newly freed black populations. That was the origination of the police department. Our friends carrying guns. Gun laws in this country are racist. Period. They always have been. And now they're not only racist, they're classist also. Because like I say, now they're geared more at keeping the guns out of the hands of poor people. And that does include most minorities. That's what they're for. It's to consolidate power in the upper classes. That's so obvious. I don't understand why some people try to deny it. So when you support background checks, when you support carry licenses, you're supporting a history of racism. And you're supporting a system of classism now. You're supporting consolidating that power at the top. Instead of requiring the government to do what they should do with criminals, you're saying, well, since they don't do it, we'll let people's rights be infringed upon. And that makes about as much sense to me as saying, when people say, oh, well, these felons are getting out. Felons. Poor people and black people. And we don't want them having guns. When they say that, what they're saying is, we don't want black people having guns, poor people having guns. And saying that is so stupid. It makes no sense to me, because it seems like it'd be the same as saying, well, since the government isn't doing its job and it's not keeping pedophiles in prison, since they're getting out and they're back on the streets, we need to teach little Timmy and little Susie how to put condoms on people, because if they're going to get raped, we at least want them to do it safely. Does that make any sense? It doesn't. It's putting the burden on the victim. So it's stupid. It's a stupid mindset. So when you say, oh, I don't think felons should be allowed to have guns, think to yourself, do I really mean felons? Do I mean people that have been convicted, served their time, been rehabilitated, and are now free citizens again? Or do I mean poor people, black people, Hispanics? Because when you support gun laws, when you support things like that, you're supporting a racist system, a classist system. That's why I don't understand why the biggest group of supporters of the Second Amendment isn't black people. I see so many people, so many blacks preaching against guns. Like the guy running for Senate in Georgia, the Reverend, preaches against guns, even though the gun laws are one of the biggest things that contributed to his people being subjugated, to being less than and having less power. And yet he's more than willing to suck it all down and go right along with the flow of that. To me, that shows he's ignorant. I've always said the biggest group of people that should be active in the Second Amendment are blacks, and also other put upon minorities, gays, Hispanics, etc. Every time we go to a pro-gun rally, it should be mostly minorities. They should at least equal us. Because, like I said, they've got more of an iron in this fire. You know, they've got more of a holding in this fight. So I don't understand why people still support this whole idea that felons should never be allowed to own guns. Like I said, until 1968, that wasn't even a thing. And it was created as a thing to take away rights from hippies and prison hippies, take away rights from blacks and prison blacks. That's all it's about. It's about power and keeping it in the right hands. So when you say, I'm okay with some gun restrictions, basically what you're saying is, I'm okay with some discrimination. I'm okay with some racism. I'm okay with some classism. Don't be like that. People like to use the term woke and say, well, woke's a bad thing. Well, woke's not a bad thing. If you're actually woke, if you're actually paying attention to that, things like, hey, this is wrong, and I'm not going to support it, that's a good thing. But when woke means you just swallow one ideology, either far right or far left, and accept it as truth, that's not being woke. That's just being indoctrinated. That's being blind. And when it comes to gun laws, when it comes to background checks, carry permits, etc., that's not being woke to support that. It's being blind. Being blind to the fact that all it is about racism, classism, discrimination, and keeping power in the hands of the people that the government wants to have that power. All right, I know that was a little bit of a heavy topic there, and I want to move on to something even more heavy right now, because I want to talk about the fundraiser going on for Fur Friends Animal Rescue right now. This is probably the last day I'm going to have to actually mention the PSD Burno giveaway, because we're about full up on the spots for that. It's been very successful, more successful than I ever could have imagined. I thought it would take till the end of the month to give away all 100 slots, but right now we are almost done. If you can look at my very fancy notes here for both my video today and keeping track of the slots given away, we've already given away 78 of the 100 slots. So not going to be much more longer until they're all gone. Now, once all 100 slots are gone, I'm going to go ahead and do the gun giveaway. I'm going to go ahead and pull someone from the karma list and say, hey, I'm giving you this gun that I have. So if you're wanting your slot, you better get it quick. If you check out my website where you go to donate, tympistolproject.com, there is a little list at the bottom that tells you how to donate to get what, and it also tells you how many spots are still open. And I'm updating that like every 15 minutes. So once it gets down to where there's like 5, I'll just sit at the computer and wait till they're gone. So don't worry, you're not going to try to donate and not get a slot. If it's still there, you can still donate. But like I say, running out of time on that. And like I say, we do want to increase. I was originally wanting to get 10,000. I'm hoping now to raise 12,000 over the course of this by the end of the month, because we do have an extra expense now. Fur Friends Animal Rescue has put in a rescue tag to pull a dog out of a shelter, a dog that has puppies, a very emaciated, poor dog. I don't know about you, but I can barely look at this picture. If you'd seen some of the other pictures I saw that they sent me, I just say I'm not putting them up because they're horrible. Dogs attacked with, I don't even want to tell the story because it makes me weepy, but one dog whose owners decided they didn't want her anymore. And when they would chase her off, she'd come back because that was her home. So they decided to start throwing lawn darts at her. Things like that. That's the kind of people that live out there. Which is why I think we need to reinstitute they needed killing laws. But we want to rescue this mother and her pups because they are scheduled to be put down. So that's why we've put in to rescue them and export them from where they're at, bring them here to Washington State where they can get the medical care they need and then get adopted out. So please give. Even if we run out of slots for the FK Burno, there's places where you can donate to get a couple boxes of free ammo, bulk boxes, a free holster from Lobo Gun Leather, the best leather holsters on the market as far as I'm concerned. So please go over and donate. And like I say, if you want one of those slots on the Good Karma list, one of those 100 slots, there's less than 2 dozen left. So go on over there, please. Get involved that way. Do a good deed. That could be your good deed for Christmas. And I'm not even going to bother talking about Patreon for the channel right now because, like I say, I'd rather people, if you got $5 to your name, instead of giving it to me, I'd rather you give it to Fur Friends Animal Rescue. So please go over there. Once again, tympistolproject.com. There is a link in the upper corner of this video that you can go over and donate. Please do so. And like I say, as soon as we fill those 100 positions, we will be doing that Good Karma drawing for that PSD. So keep your eyes open. As soon as that list hits 0 on the website, know probably the next day we're going to do the drawing. I'm hoping to be able to do it Saturday because I'm thinking we'll be full by Saturday. So maybe you might want to come to the live chat Saturday evening, because we have live chats every evening. If you want to come in and get involved with the chats, please do so. Also, I want to remind everyone, if you want to send me questions or topics you'd like to see me discuss, please send them to shootingleftofcenter@gmail.com. In the subject line, put Inside Guns, and I will try to address your topics or answer your questions here on air. And also, if you disagree with me on something, I still do slap the yank. So if you want to disagree with me, you want to come on one of my live chats in the evening and tell me how wrong I am about something, please do so. Just let me know. Just do the same thing. Send your emails to Shooting Left of Center once again, but this time just in the subject line, put Slap the Yank, and I'll get you on the show. So with that all being said, I want to thank everyone for being here again today, even though it's been a little dark topics lately. We'll change that next week. We'll try to get into something more lively. If I can work next week, my mother's going to be visiting, so keep your eyes open. Hopefully I'll be able to maintain a full schedule next week. Maybe not. But until then, I want to sign off, say thanks everyone for coming today. I hope I see you again on Monday. And until then, as far as the state of the world is concerned today, it is what it is. But with all of us working together and doing the things I know we can do, what it will be in the future is better.